Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Ahead on this episode of What's in My Head, a little bit about microphones for webcasts and podcasts. Welcome back to the show. Before we get into our talk about microphones, I did want to catch you up on the camera setup. In our last episode, I told you that I was going to be switching to the Sony RX100 III camera. I am using it for this episode as my primary camera, and I'm not entirely happy with the mounting. It's mounted too high, so I'm having to tilt my head back a lot so that you can so that I can look like I'm looking at you. But I did want to show you that I do have that set up. I've also got the Logitech C920 set up as my secondary camera so that I can actually switch between cameras. The Logitech actually came up looking pretty good compared with the Sony. It is nice to be able to have them reasonably well matched. Another nice thing that I'm going to be able to do with the Logitech camera is actually be able to change its view, so that if we want to do a demonstration or something that I'm down on the desk, I can just move it around and we can now look at the desk and see what's going on the desk. Pretty quick setup and change to do that. I can even do it with a minimal distraction while I am talking to you, although it's a little harder to do. Most of those kind of things will be preset before we actually go with them. As you can hear, it makes a little bit of noise as I'm moving things around. Also, as I said, I was not entirely happy with the mount of the Sony camera. It does need some work, but let's take a look at that. As you can see, I've got the what's called a platypod. It is attached to the bottom of the shelf above my desk, and then there's a ball head on top of that. And the camera sits on top of that, and you can see it's pointing down at a bit of an angle. And so I end up having to look up, and it's a little unnatural for me to do it while I'm looking natural talking to you. So that'll be an adjustment for a future time. I also wanted to talk, like I said, about microphones. That was the big discussion for this episode. And so we're going to talk a little bit about mics. And as you can tell, I am not using the lavalier mic that I used last time. I was really unhappy with the sound for that. There's a couple of reasons for that, and we'll talk about that as we go through. We're going to be testing 4 different microphones for the show this time around. But let's talk about the different types of microphones that we have out there and the different types that we are going to be going through for this episode. So we're going to be talking about basically 3 different kinds of microphones that you will run into. Some are omnidirectional, which means that they pick up sound from all around. And we kind of look at this picture here, and it shows a circle around the microphone, but that doesn't really show the entire story. When you're talking about an omnidirectional microphone, it's more like there's a big basketball over the microphone, and that whole area, pretty much anything all around is picked up by the microphone. So it's not just a flat field of view. Cardioid microphones pick up sound generally in front of the microphone, but they do pick up a little bit behind. And as you can see from this diagram, it's kind of like a fat donut. So there's a little bit behind the microphone. Most of it's in front. And again, so it's this kind of heart-shaped pattern out in front of the microphone. The third type of microphone, and the one that I'm using right now, is what's called a shotgun. The shotgun microphone has typically a very directional, highly directional pickup pattern. And these are used a lot, specifically in television and film, where we need to have a microphone that we can have out of the shot and pick up just the voices of people talking, and not pick up all the extraneous noises that might be going on around in the environment. So we're going to look at 4 different microphones during this episode: omnidirectional, cardioid, and shotgun. And like I said, you've been listening to the shotgun, and So let's go real quick through the last one you heard last week. I don't like that microphone. It was Sony's ECM77B. It's an omnidirectional condenser microphone. Um, One of the reasons that I don't think it works well in this environment. Number one, it's Omni, so it's picking up every noise all over the place. The other thing is it's placed down here. So even though it does pick up from everywhere, it's pointed at the bottom of my chin. And obviously my voice comes out of my mouth. So while they work well in, I mean, you see them all the time on television news. Um, Everyone on the news desk when you're watching your local news broadcast is wearing lavalier microphones. They work well in those environments because everything is very, very well controlled. I'm obviously shooting this in a less controlled environment. I mean, this is my family room. And so I don't have all the silence that's required. I don't, sounds bounce around in a strange thing because basically I'm talking to a wall. My desk is against the wall. And so it's not an ideal microphone for this environment. It sounds kind of like I'm talking in a big box. So we'll be discussing again this shotgun microphone that I'm talking on now. We'll be talking about a microphone from Electrovoice from years ago called the 635A. I believe it's still available today. It also is an omnidirectional microphone, but it's been very popular for field, or used to be very popular for field news gathering, field interviews, that kind of thing. A very forgiving microphone, and a pretty decent sounding microphone, especially for a microphone that's been on the market for decades, literally for decades. This microphone that is on the screen now, the Audio Technica DR-KX1, this is a kick drum microphone. So it's designed for use in a situation where the sound levels are very high and we don't want to pick up anything besides what we're picking up. It actually has a tonal response that kind of leans towards the low end because it's designed for a bass microphone or a bass drum. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that compares with the other microphones in the lineup. And then finally, we're going to be checking out the Electrovoice RE16. This is a radio microphone, radio studio microphone from days gone by. It's kind of fallen out of favor, but it and its slightly more expensive brother, or its much more expensive brother, the RE20, were the microphones in radio for years. They're cardioid microphones, they're dynamic, so they don't require external power. They sound pretty good. So we'll be checking out these 4 microphones. Let's get to it. Okay, so as I said, the first microphone we're going to be checking out is a Sony shotgun microphone. This one came off of an old broadcast television camera, and it's a good looking microphone. It's a decent sounding microphone. You've been listening to it so far throughout the program, and it does sound nice and warm. I was actually surprised at how well it is working out in this close miking kind of scenario. Usually these are best used in a situation where the subject is a bit of a distance from you. So I find this very interesting how nicely this is coming off and how nice this is sounding in this particular setup. And as I said, it's not a very obtrusive microphone. So if I'm concerned about seeing a microphone in my shots, I don't think this one will bother me a whole lot. If I do find that it's picking up a lot of breath noise and that kind of thing, there's a windscreen that I can put on it, and that will become a fairly obtrusive, very obtrusive thing to look at. And so that's the Sony. It does have again the 1542233. One thing I do want to tell you about a shotgun microphone, though, that does make it a little bit trickier for this kind of production is, as I said, it's very directional. So if for whatever reason I'm talking and I move off the microphone, what you hear is that my voice goes away fairly quickly if I'm not right on. One thing that is surprising me about this mic is that I'm hearing a fair amount of extraneous noise. So when I'm not actually talking and I'm actually using the keyboard on the computer keyboard, I actually do hear a fair amount of key clicking, and that's kind of surprising to me. I thought this was going to be a lot better at rejecting that noise. So we're going to go ahead and check out now the Electrovoice 635A. I have this one up on the stand, and as you can see, it's a little more obtrusive. It's a bright color. We can see the thing fairly well. It definitely shows up in the shot as on this side shot, and so it's a bit more of an obtrusive microphone. As I said before too, this is a very old microphone. It's been around for years, and they're hard to beat. It is an omnidirectional microphone, so one would expect that we're going to hear a lot of off-axis noise. And you can hear right now I'm rubbing my hands together kind of behind or beside the microphone, so you can hear that. I will, click the mouse, which you can hear in the background, hit the keys on the keyboard, and so you hear a little bit of sound from the outside world. Actually, a lot less than I expected, and maybe that's why this has been such a popular mic for field broadcast and radio, field radio work over the years, because it is easy to handheld. It holds well, and it doesn't seem to pick up as much extraneous noise as I thought that it would. So it's a good sounding, sounds decent. We'll definitely compare them all in playback later, and I'll give you my thoughts after I've recorded the entire episode. So that's the Electrovoice 635A. It's an omnidirectional dynamic microphone. Next up, we'll move on to that strange Audio Technica Guitar Center kick drum mic, and we'll see what that sounds like. Okay, we've got the Audio Technica mic up on the stand now. In listening to the mic so far, it sounds pretty nice. It's also it's a black microphone, so it kind of blends in if I'm wearing a dark shirt, as you can see, and it actually looks pretty good on the stand. It does, even though it's right up in my face, it's not very obtrusive. The most obtrusive thing is this awful gray mic clip. And that micro clip is only being used because it's the one that is kind of sort of required for the EV microphones. And because of their size, they're a very slender microphone. It's hard for them to be gripped in most other more standard microphone mounts or stand adapters. So I'm just using that one. It's easier to clip things in and out of than some of the specialty clips that I need for the other microphones. We now have the RE16 mounted up on the stand. And one thing that I'm kind of surprised by, I'm not noticing, at least in the earbuds while I'm listening, a huge difference in all these microphones. They all sound good. And so it's going to be kind of hard to choose which microphone I want to use going forward, I think. It gets down in some cases to appearance. Do I want a visible mic in the shot, or do I want it to blend away, or do I really care? And so that's going to be an interesting thought process for me. This particular mic is kind of an interesting microphone. I bought this one many years ago when I was working in radio. It was my station mic, and so I've had this mic since about the mid '80s, and I bought the RE16 simply because I couldn't afford what was the standard, and the standard at the time was the RE20, and the RE20 was about 4 times as much money as this microphone. I subsequently learned to find out that one of my favorite musicians swore by the RE16 for his vocal mic. So I have kind of a soft spot for this mic. One thing I do notice about it is that its volume output is a great deal lower than any of the other microphones, which means that I have to really crank up the gain. And you can hear in this that it's not quite as loud. It's down about 3 or 4 decibels, which is a unit of audio volume. It's down about 3 or 4 decibels from the other microphones. So that again, RE16 from Electrovoice. It's a cardioid dynamic. So that's going to be it for the test. I think I'm going to go back for the rest of the episode to the shotgun. Okay, so we've got the shotgun back up on the stand, and I do like the sonic quality of this microphone. What I don't like is the amount of extraneous noise that it picks up. I'm playing with something on the desk, just fiddling or moving something around, and that's actually very surprising to me about just how much extraneous noise this microphone picks up. Might not be a bad idea to try the windscreen for it, and I'll show you what that looks like. And you'll be surprised at how this thing works. It's actually pretty neat. It's, again, though, designed mostly for wind. We're going to make some noise while I shove this on the microphone. I'll duck that down as best I can, but we'll go ahead and put this on. Okay, so now we have the it's called a dead kitten, or that's the name for it in the industry, and mostly because it looks like a very fuzzy cat. Um, it does do a nice job, or a fairly decent job, of suppressing the extraneous noise, and but it is, as you can see, quite an obtrusive thing. Usually, when these microphones are used in the field for television production or radio production, they're not shoved up in somebody's face. They are definitely out of shot most of the time. So you wouldn't see this unless somebody screwed up and inadvertently got the thing in the shot. So we'll play with that, see what we feel like. Right now, like I said, I like the sound of this microphone. I don't like that I have to have the dead kitten on it. I don't like all the extraneous noise. I'm going to pull the dead kitten back off. And boy, that makes a big difference too. Wow. I never realized how much difference this thing made in the tonal qualities of that microphone, or of those microphones. There are a couple other microphones that I would like to take a look at, or take a listen to, have a chance to audition. One is the Rode PodMic. This is an interesting mic. For about $100, you get a large diaphragm, dynamic microphone with cardioid pattern. I've heard some other webcasters test these things, and I was really amazed at how good a $99 microphone can sound. They were comparing it with about an $800 microphone in some of their comparisons. One of the things that's been necessary for all of these microphones is some sort of interface that allows the microphone to audio to be brought into the computer over the USB port. And I chose the PreSonus AUDIOBOX USB 96. This is an example. It's a well-priced, good-sounding audio interface. It's not what I'm using. The one that I'm using is a very old Lexicon Lambda series interface. I'm using it because I had it. You cannot buy it anymore. And one of the deals with this particular project has been to try and do things uh, working as much with what I had as I on hand as I could. Now we ended up breaking a lot of that in building the computer, and I'll talk about the computer in a future episode. The computer build out for this project has been a lot of fun, but a very interesting process. Another microphone that I'd like to try, and is fairly popular, is Blue's Yeti multi-pattern condenser microphone. This microphone is interesting because it has, for a number of reasons. One, its USB interface is built in. So this basically plugs into the computer directly with a USB cable, standard USB cable. Another interesting thing about this microphone is it has 4 different pickup patterns. It has an omnidirectional pattern, a cardioid pattern, one pattern that we didn't talk about called figure 8, which allows it to pick up from both the front and the back of the microphone while rejecting the sides. And that's kind of a useful thing in certain interview kind of situations where you only have the ability to use one mic. Uh, Having its own USB interface makes it interesting too, in that there's not another piece of gear sitting around. right now the gear pile over here is beginning to look kind of like Frankenstein's monster. And because there's the computer, there's the HD60S bringing the camera in, there is the Lambda audio interface, and there's going to be a little bit of audio processing between the microphone and the interface to try and get, or maybe some of that if necessary, to try and help with equalization, noise reduction, compression, all those kind of things, to make this sound even better. Because I am a sound guy, I want this to sound as absolutely as good as it can. So anyway, that's it for now. I'm going to go away for a few moments, which you won't see. You won't see the few moments. What will end up happening is that this funny little transition will go by, and I'll come back and tell you which mic I chose. So we'll see you in a minute. After listening to the recordings of all of the microphones and actually making a few more recordings and a few more tests, I have decided that for the time being anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go with the Audio-Technica kick drum mic. It does the best job of rejecting off-axis sounds and still has a good overall tonal quality. I liked the actual tonal quality of the shotgun the best, but there was just too much extraneous noise that it picked up. I do know that in the long run I'm going to end up having to get a better shock mount. There is kind of an underlying buzzing noise or humming noise that I'm hearing in all of the recordings, and this has nothing to do with the individual microphones. The reason for this is that the microphone is mounted on basically a hard stand. This stand is then mounted to the shelf, which is mounted to the wall. And on the other side of the wall from where we are recording, again attached to a shelf to the wall, is the network center for our house. So I have a 24-point Netgear switch that's its fans are running. My Drobo NAS box is up there with its fans and motors running. So those noises are being transmitted through the shelf, through the wall, through the mic stand to the microphone, and they're being picked up. So I'll have to get a shock mount. But I think overall, for now anyway, the Audio-Technica kick drum mic is going to be the one that's going to sound the best. I do, as I said, still want to investigate the Rode PodMic and the Blue Yeti. I have to try and figure out a way to see if I can get those on a loan or something. The PodMic, as I said, sells for about $100. The Yeti, I think, sells for either 150 or 250. I'm not sure which. I think it's actually 150. They're not super expensive microphones, but I don't want to go out and buy them and then, have them not be any better than what I'm talking to you on now. So that's pretty much been a wrap up of the microphone tests that I'm going to do for the time being. I do have a whole lot of different microphones that I use when I'm doing sound for bands. Different drum mics, smaller drum mics, a lot of vocal microphones. And I kind of sort of for a moment thought, well, I should test my regular vocal microphones. But they're really not designed for this kind of application. They're designed for an application that is a lot more dynamic, a lot more stressful. And so, not that this one isn't. I mean, this microphone is obviously designed for something completely different than from what I'm using it for. But I think it's got the best sound overall of the mics that I have. I think it's going to do the best in this situation because it is, again, designed to do something close and reject other sounds. It's designed to listen to the kick drum and be placed in front of the kick drum, but not pick up all the other drums around it, the other things going on the stage. So I think this is going to be a good choice, at least for now. Again, I do want to try out the PodMic if I can get one. But that's pretty much it for this. Thanks for joining me, and we will be back again in a couple of weeks. I think next time we'll talk a little bit about the process of selecting parts and building the computer that we're using for production of this show. Again, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.